The quiet whisper of destiny. Daniel sat by the edge of a quiet riverbank, his heart weighed with the same questions he had carried for months. God, he whispered, I'm trying to follow you, but it feels like I'm wandering in the dark. Show me what I'm supposed to do. He stared at the gentle ripples of the water, waiting for an answer, but only silence greeted him. Yet, as the cool breeze brushed his face, a memory surfaced, a lesson Father Thomas had once shared: the chosen ones are not those who avoid struggle, they are the ones who continue to seek God through it. Suddenly, Daniel understood. His impatience was part of the journey, a test of faith in God's perfect timing. I trust you, he whispered again, feeling a deep peace settle in his spirit. As the days passed, Daniel embraced patience, allowing each day to teach him something new. His inner transformation was subtle, yet profound. He no longer rushed through life, desperate for answers. Instead, he sought God's presence in the stillness, trusting that his timing was never late. The signs begin. One afternoon, while working in the fields, Daniel noticed something peculiar, a string of unusual events he couldn't shake. He began seeing repeating numbers everywhere: 1111 on a clock, 222 on a receipt, 333 on a passing car. At first, he dismissed them as coincidences, but deep down, he felt these were not random occurrences. The words from a sermon echoed in his mind: God speaks through the ordinary, through signs that only those with eyes of faith can see. Was God trying to communicate with him through these signs? Was this the whisper of divine timing Father Thomas had spoken of? Daniel began paying attention, not just to the numbers, but to his dreams, his encounters, and the feelings of déjà vu that came more frequently. It felt as though the universe was aligning itself, confirming something he had long sensed: change was coming, and it was divinely orchestrated. Jacob's story. One evening, as the village gathered for a feast, Daniel found himself sitting next to Jacob, a man known for his quick temper and harsh demeanor. Most avoided him, but Daniel sensed a deeper pain behind the man's anger. Over the course of the meal, Jacob's story unfolded. He spoke of the deep grief he had carried since his wife's passing, leaving him to raise their children alone. She was everything to me, Jacob confessed, his voice breaking. Now, I don't even know who I am without her. Daniel's heart stirred with compassion. He realized Jacob's anger was a mask for his suffering. Instead of offering empty words of comfort, Daniel simply listened, allowing Jacob the space to be vulnerable. You're stronger than you think, Daniel said gently. Even in your pain, God is with you, guiding you through this. In that moment, Daniel understood that being chosen wasn't about escaping suffering, it was about finding God in the midst of it. He saw that compassion was one of the most powerful ways to reflect God's love, and in showing Jacob empathy, Daniel himself felt closer to the divine. A season of blessings. Weeks passed, and the signs grew stronger. Daniel knew something significant was about to unfold, not just for him, but for those around him. The peculiar signs were not merely coincidences, they were confirmations, divine nudges pointing to the breakthrough ahead. One day, while helping repair the roof of a neighbor's home, a woman approached him. You've brought peace to this village, Daniel, she said. You carry the light of Christ in everything you do. Daniel was taken aback by her words. He had never seen himself as someone special, certainly not as a chosen one. But in that moment, he realized that God had been working through him all along, even when he hadn't noticed. His journey, filled with doubt, struggle, and waiting, had prepared him to be a light for others. The breakthrough. One evening, as Daniel knelt in prayer, a sudden warmth enveloped him. It was as if the very presence of God had descended upon him, filling him with a peace that surpassed understanding. In that quiet moment, Daniel knew his breakthrough had arrived. It wasn't a loud or dramatic event. Rather, it was a deep inner knowing that everything he had endured, every struggle, every delay, had been preparing him for this moment. The transformation was not in the external circumstances, but within him. His heart was now fully aligned with God's will. The season of favor had begun. Opportunities arose in ways Daniel could have never imagined. But more than that, he felt a profound sense of purpose, knowing that God had called him not just to receive blessings, but to be a blessing to others. Walking in faith. As the sun set over the village, Daniel smiled to himself. He still didn't have all the answers, and perhaps he never would. But he had learned to trust in God's timing, to embrace the waiting, and to recognize the signs of divine favor along the way. He had become a vessel of God's love, carrying the light of Christ wherever he went. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, Daniel was no longer afraid. For he knew that God's plans were far greater than anything he could have imagined, and his life was a testimony to the quiet, yet powerful, whisper of destiny. The Quiet Whisper of Destiny Part 2. Chapter 1. In the Silence. Daniel sat on a small rock by the riverbank, his hands folded in quiet prayer. The world around him was calm, but inside, his heart churned with frustration and doubt. He had been seeking God for months, praying for direction, for a sign, for something to show him what to do next. But no answer came. The silence was almost deafening. "God, I'm trying to follow you, but it feels like I'm wandering in the dark," he whispered, his voice carrying over the still water. "Show me what I'm supposed to do." He stared at the ripples in the river, hoping for some divine sign. But instead of a voice from heaven or a miraculous sign, the only response was a gentle breeze that brushed against his face. For a moment, Daniel felt foolish for expecting something grand. But then, a memory of Father Thomas's words returned to him. The chosen ones are not those who avoid struggle, they are the ones who, in the midst of their struggle, continue to seek God. Suddenly, it dawned on him. His impatience, his constant desire for answers, was part of the test. Perhaps God wasn't silent, perhaps the lesson was in the waiting. Daniel took a deep breath, his frustration giving way to a quiet peace. "I trust you," he whispered, even though his heart still longed for more. "Even when I don't understand, I trust you." In the days that followed, Daniel made a conscious effort to practice patience. He reminded himself that the journey was just as important as the destination, that each day held its own lessons if only he would slow down enough to see them. Slowly, he began to let go of his need for immediate answers, learning to find peace in the waiting. Chapter 2. Signs of the Divine. It started with something small, a clock that flashed 11:11. Then, the next day, it was 2:22 on a grocery store receipt. At first, Daniel didn't think much of it. But as the days passed, the numbers kept repeating. 3:33 on a passing car, 4:44 on a street sign. These weren't coincidences. He realized something bigger was at play. He recalled a sermon from months ago, where Father Thomas had spoken about how God communicates through subtle signs, small whispers that only those truly in tune with Him can recognize. God speaks through the ordinary, the priest had said, through signs that others might miss, but the chosen ones will see. Daniel began paying attention to more than just the numbers. He noticed other things, too. His dreams were becoming more vivid, filled with symbolism he couldn't quite grasp. He experienced moments of déjà vu, like he had lived certain moments before. Even strangers seemed to carry messages, though they didn't realize it. It was as if the universe, or rather, God, was trying to get his attention, aligning his spirit for something monumental. And Daniel, for the first time in months, felt a sense of anticipation stirring in his soul. Chapter 3: Jacob's Pain. One evening, the village gathered for a feast, celebrating the end of the harvest. Daniel sat quietly with a group of farmers, enjoying the camaraderie when Jacob, a man known for his quick temper and harsh words, joined them. Most people kept their distance from Jacob, but Daniel saw something different in him, a deep sadness behind his anger. The two men began talking, and slowly, Jacob opened up about the pain he had carried for years. His wife had passed away unexpectedly, leaving him to raise their 3 children alone. "She was everything to me," Jacob said, his voice trembling with emotion. "And now, I don't even know who I am without her." Daniel felt a deep compassion for Jacob. He realized that the man's anger was a shield, protecting him from the overwhelming grief he had buried for so long. "I can't imagine how hard that must have been," Daniel said softly. "But you're still here. You're still caring for your children. That takes strength, Jacob. More than most people realize." Jacob looked at Daniel, his eyes softening for the first time. "I don't feel strong," he admitted. "Most days, I feel like I'm barely holding on." Daniel nodded, understanding. "You don't have to be strong all the time. It's okay to feel what you're feeling. But know this, you're not alone in this. God sees you. He's with you, even when it feels like the darkness will never end." They sat in silence for a while, the weight of Jacob's grief heavy between them. Daniel didn't offer solutions, didn't try to fix the pain. He simply sat with him, offering his presence and understanding. Sometimes, he realized, the greatest gift you can give someone is simply to be there. Chapter 4: The Power of Patience. In the weeks that followed, Daniel began to notice how his patience was transforming him. He no longer rushed through his days, desperate for answers or signs. Instead, he found peace in the waiting, knowing that God's timing was perfect. He also noticed a shift in the people around him. One day, while helping repair a neighbor's roof, a woman approached him. "You've been a blessing to this village, Daniel," she said with a smile. "You carry the light of Christ with you in everything you do." Daniel was taken aback by her words. He didn't see himself that way. He was just trying to live his life, to follow God the best he could. But the woman's words stayed with him. Perhaps, he thought, his journey of waiting and trusting God wasn't just for him. Perhaps he was meant to be a light for others, to show them what it meant to walk in faith, even when the path was unclear. Chapter 5: A Season of Blessings. The signs continued to appear, but now, Daniel no longer felt the same urgency he once did. He had come to trust that everything was unfolding according to God's plan. One evening, while sitting in quiet prayer, a warmth enveloped him, a peace that seemed to come from nowhere. It was as though God himself had drawn near, wrapping Daniel in his presence. In that moment, Daniel knew. The breakthrough he had been waiting for had arrived, not in the form of some grand external event, but in the quiet transformation of his heart. He no longer needed to know the future because he trusted the one who held it. The season of blessings began shortly after. Opportunities arose for Daniel to serve in ways he had never imagined. People began seeking him out for advice, for prayer, for guidance. He had become, in the eyes of the village, a spiritual leader, though he had never intended to be one. But more than that, Daniel felt a profound sense of purpose. He knew that everything he had endured, the waiting, the struggles, the doubts, had prepared him for this moment. He had been called not just to receive blessings, but to be a blessing to others. Chapter 6: Walking in the Light. As Daniel's influence grew, so did his understanding of what it meant to be chosen. It wasn't about being perfect or having all the answers. It was about walking in faith, trusting that God's plan was always greater than anything he could imagine. He no longer sought out signs or waited for breakthroughs. Instead, he focused on being present in each moment, serving others with humility and compassion. He realized that the signs had always been there. Not to give him answers, but to guide him along the journey. One evening, as the sun set over the village, Daniel stood at the edge of the river where his journey had begun. The water was calm, just as it had been on that day months ago. But now, Daniel saw it differently. The silence wasn't a void, but an invitation to listen more deeply. The waiting wasn't a test, but a preparation for something greater. Daniel smiled to himself, feeling the weight of God's presence all around him. His journey wasn't over, and there were still many lessons to learn. But for the first time in his life, he felt truly at peace. He was exactly where he needed to be, walking the path that God had set before him, one step at a time.
If this message resonates with you, hit that like button and let the universe know you're ready for your breakthrough. Subscribe to our channel for more transformative insights and guidance on your journey to abundance. Share this video with friends and family who need to hear this today. Let's amplify our positive energy together. Your engagement not only helps us grow but also strengthens the cosmic energy we are building as a community. Together, we can uplift each other and manifest our dreams into reality, one positive action at a time.